humiliating. Hey, what's up? Welcome to my instant reaction to the 49ers 47 to 24 loss to the Arizona Cardinals. I'm here in Glendale. The Niners season is over. They're 6-11. And we can get into the game, but I want to start in the post-game locker room, in the post-game press conference. A lot of the veterans spoke, and we're now into the offseason. They can kind of talk big picture. 3 veterans in particular spoke who were really interesting. Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, George Kittle. And let's start with the defensive players first. They were on the field for a 47-point blowout. They got destroyed. Fred Warner was out there for that. Nick Bosa was out there for that. I mean, a lot of starters. And yet the defense went through the motions, couldn't stop anything. I mean, the Cardinals aren't even good. So after the game, both Bosa and Warner say that they were embarrassed by their own defense. Essentially that they're embarrassed to play for this defense and embarrassed by their collective performance. That's an interesting word to use, both of them, embarrassed. Just last week, Bosa was talking about how much fun it seems playing for the Lions would be. He was looking at them almost with longing. Like, wow, that team looks like a lot of fun. The Niners don't seem like they're fun at all. And it seems like the best players on their team, the guys who are really accustomed to playing at a high level and winning, are starting to maybe disassociate themselves. Because Nick Bosa is not an embarrassing player. Fred Warner's not an embarrassing player. And how much embarrassment will these guys put up with until Kyle Shanahan figures it out? Then you had George Kittle, who is like the most aw shucks, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all kind of guy. So he's talking about exit interviews. They're tomorrow. And Matt Barrow says, so you're going to talk to Kyle tomorrow, right? And George says, I don't know, will I? Barrow says, well, yeah, exit interviews tomorrow, right? And he's like, well, I might just FaceTime him. Meaning, I'm not going to wait in line to talk to Kyle in his office. He should wait. I mean, it almost felt like Kittle was saying he should wait in line to talk to me. And what's funny is the exit interview is supposed to be Kyle telling the player what he thinks of their season. But Kittle, who's going to be in the Hall of Fame, and Kyle probably won't, or at least hasn't put together the resume yet, says that he'll talk to Kyle about his own season, George's, and he'll also talk to Kyle about Kyle's season, how he did this year. He said that. I'm going to talk to him about how he did this year. And he said it in the aw shucks, nothing really to think about way, but it stuck out to me. So I said, hey, George, how do you think Kyle did this season? And he said, well, I'm going to save that for my conversation with Kyle. And he said, that's a good question. Maybe he's going to tell Kyle, I don't care what anyone says. This was your best season. You had so many injuries and tragedies and misfortunes that actually, I don't care what Grant Cohn says. I think this was your best year. I don't think he's going to say that, because if he were going to say that, he could say that publicly. He could give us a little preview. I'm going to reassure Kyle. He's probably being really hard on himself. He's blaming himself for everything like he always does. And I'm going to go in there and tell him, Kyle, it's on us. We didn't execute. You're a great coach. I haven't heard anyone in the Niners call him a great coach in a long time. It sounds like, I'm just guessing here, that George is going to have some actual criticism for Kyle Shanahan. Maybe he's going to hold a mirror up to Kyle Shanahan's face. Kyle, thank you for praising me for my season. I know I did really well, but I don't think you did so well. Here's 5 things you could have done better. And you can't scoff at me. I'm not Grant Cohn. I'm George freaking Kittle. Look at me when I talk to you. Could be something like that. I don't know. Maybe George is too Midwestern to be that direct, but I'd like to know. I think that, George Kittle knows football a lot better than I do. And I think all of us could probably list 10 Kyle Shanahan football sins right off the bat. So I'm really interested to know. I wish I could find out what George Kittle is going to talk about, but there's a lot of meat on the bone there for George, who really understands football. His dad was a coach. George Kittle could be a head coach. I'd like to see him, yeah, like Dan Campbell right now, all that emotion and passion and knowledge, I'm sure, as well. I think Kittle has that too. Anyway, didn't seem like the vets on the team really went to bat for Kyle Shanahan after the latest loss. They've now lost, to end the season, they lost 7 of their final 8 games. Which means, what were they, 5-4 at one point? Anyway, they freaking collapsed, and they're embarrassed about it, as they absolutely should be. Gold Towel says Kyle's 5th 10-loss season coming up. Andrew says, I don't want to say it again, but I called this record weeks ago. What a sad team. Every time they lose the bowl, they come back next season and drop 6 wins. Sven says, trade Debo and a pick for Tyreek. You know what's interesting? Jim Tom Sula's season, 5-11. This season, 6-11. That's terrible. Kyle was so bad this year. Sven says, trade Debo for at a pick for Tyreek. I don't think you're going to get Tyreek. I don't think anyone's going to take on Debo's contract. That's the Niners' burden. HR says they left Nick with a thanks. Okay. So for the last few weeks, John Lynch in particular, the whole team really, but Lynch talking about finding the root issue with the 49ers. He even said it can't just be injuries. It's got to be something more. We're going to do a deep dive to find the root issue. And I think when you watch this game, Juwan Jennings getting ejected, 13 penalties. 13. One of the oldest teams in the league commits 13 penalties, while the Cardinals, who aren't very good, pretty well coached, commit 1. Kyle, when you're searching around far and wide, all over the world, trying to find the root cause of the Niners 6-11 season, I'll give you a hint. It's you. You were the root cause. I'm not saying you're a bad coach. You've done good things in the past. Really good things. Not great things, but really good things. But this year, you were a bad coach. You were the root cause of the 49ers 6-11 season. So many decisions that Kyle Shanahan made, starting with firing Steve Wilks. If you can replace Steve Wilks with Bill Belichick or Robert Saleh, by all means do it. But you didn't. You fired him because you were upset. You should have been mad at yourself. It all stems with Kyle Shanahan's not unwillingness, but complete refusal or maybe inability to assess himself. I asked him the question this week, how do you assess yourself? He said, I don't understand the question, which is an honest answer. He doesn't understand how to assess himself or why it's important. Can't do it. So he had the opportunity after the Super Bowl. Okay, let me look in the mirror. Let me figure out how I blew this and make sure I never do it again. Had he done that, who knows? Maybe they're in the playoffs right now. But instead, he blames Wilks, who was not at fault for that Super Bowl loss. You blame Wilks and you replace him with Nick Sorensen. So you just made your team worse because you wouldn't look in the mirror. Option 1, look in the mirror, blame yourself. Everyone gives you a round of applause. Oh my God, he's growing. He's maturing. What a coach. What a guy. Nope, you blame Steve Wilks, replace Nick Sorensen. That's one of the worst moves in the NFL this year. And then it was just bad decision after bad decision. Signing Devondre Campbell. And then playing Devondre Campbell all season over D. Winters simply because you signed Devondre Campbell and gave him $5 million for some reason. That was him. Not cutting Jake Moody ever. Letting Jake Moody miss all those kicks this year. Why? That was on Kyle. Sticking with Deebo Samuel relentlessly all season, even though he was awful as a receiver, as a running back, and not really featuring Ricky Pearsall until the season was over. And then finding out, oh, he was ready, he's good. Getting every single running back on the team injured because he simply refused to rotate them. Turns out, all the running backs on the roster were good this year. Every single one of them. Except for McCaffrey, who was injured, not in football shape. Jordan Mason, great. Isaac Arendo, really good. Patrick Taylor Jr., apparently he's freaking good too. He was terrific in this game. And yet, Kyle Shanahan The only player he would use as a change of pace back this season was Debo, who averaged 3.2 yards per carry. Every other running back averaged more than that. Patrick Taylor averaged 4.2 yards per carry. The other guys averaged over 5 yards a carry. Christian McCaffrey notwithstanding. Just the mismanagement of the running back position alone. I mean, imagine if if Kyle had actually rotated Mason and Garendo early in the year and then kept using them when McCaffrey came back. You could have had the best three-headed monster in the freaking league. Instead, McCaffrey comes back, gets 20-plus touches a game, goes down in 3 weeks. Garendo never was a starter in college, had injuries in college, got injured again, MCL injury. The special teams are freaking abysmal, and they're not going to get better under Kyle Shanahan because he doesn't care about special teams. He doesn't know about special teams. He'll say it proudly. I don't know anything about special teams. So what he does is just throws a bunch of resources at it. Oh, okay, well, we'll draft a punter in round 4, and we'll draft a kicker in round 3, and then don't ask me about it. We're good. No, you could draft a kicker in round 1. Your special teams are going to suck because you're not involved in it. You're the head coach and you have nothing to offer on special teams. Head coaches are supposed to be guys who could coach literally anything on the team. A lot of coaches in the NFL have been position coaches on offensive, defense, position coaches all around the team, special teams coordinators. He was a wide receiver coach, a quarterback coach for 1 year, and a coordinator. He's not really a coach. He's a play caller. So the good news is that if Kyle Shanahan looks in the mirror, a real mirror, not like one of those circus funny mirrors that make you look taller than you are or bigger than you are, like a real mirror. If he looks at it this offseason, plenty of time, and he's honest about what he sees, and he acknowledges that he was the root cause of the problems this year, and he actually works to fix them, the Niners will be good next year. Because he's talented. The problem with Kyle isn't that he's not talented. I mean, that was Chip Kelly's fault problem. Tom Sula's problem. The problem with him is that for all his talent, he's not quite good enough to win the big one. And if he would just change a little bit, tweak something about him, his personality, about his identity, he could do it. He has the talent. But there's something inside him that holds himself back. You call it whatever you want to call it. An X factor. He's his own biggest enemy. If he can just finally get over that and say, you know what? I wasn't playing the best players this year for whatever reason. I blew the Super Bowl. I promoted the wrong defensive coordinator. I played Devontae Campbell too long. I played Deebo Samuel too long. I'm going to tell everyone this was not my best season. After looking at the film, after really taking a deep dive, I blame myself. And I have all the time in the world this offseason to fix it and be my best version of myself next year. If he said that, how confident, how optimistic would you feel about this team? It's all about him. He has the power to change and correct the issues that plague this team this year. They're all within his power. He can control it. Do you think he'll do it? I want to be optimistic and say, yeah, I think Kyle Shanahan will actually be honest with himself this offseason, look in the mirror, grow and evolve. I want to say that I think he can do that because I feel like every human being has it within him to do it. But I've never seen him do those things. Ever. Not one time. And so I have a feeling they'll bring him back and the team will be pretty similar next year. Maybe they'll get rid of Nick Sorensen. Maybe they'll get rid of Jake Moody. But it'll be the same attitude of Kyle running a team and insisting that he's not any part of the problem and systematically looking for people to throw under the bus for the Niners' poor results. I don't expect the Niners to do better next year. They may have a better record because their opponents are weaker, but I don't expect them to be a better team because I don't expect Kyle Shanahan to change anything about himself. But I dare him to, and I would be so pleasantly surprised to see him do it. I know a lot of people think like I'm rooting against Kyle Shanahan or I'm trying to get him fired. I just think that we know who he is after 8 years and that people don't change. But I could be wrong. Maybe we don't know who Kyle Shanahan is. Maybe his whole life was building up to this offseason where he's going to make the necessary changes and create the best version of himself as a coach. Possible. I'm open-minded. I just don't. If I had to bet on it, I wouldn't think that he would actually look in the mirror, even look in the mirror. Because again, it was 4 days ago when I asked him to assess himself and he said, does not compute. Don't understand what that means. I'm sorry. Did you just speak Greek? I don't speak that language. The problem with this too is like, I feel like everyone knows it's him. I can't prove it. I think the players know it's him. He doesn't know it's him. He's the only one who doesn't realize he's the root of the issue. Yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's on the plane home right now, making a list of all the things he can do better this year. Maybe he is. That'd be great. I'd love to see it. David Camacho says top 5 offense in yards, but bottom 5 in the red zone has got to be a coaching issue. Oh, yeah. The red zone issues all freaking year. It's another thing. Brother Bob anti-Kyle Levy says first Bosa, now Kittle with no good words for Kyle Levy. Zach Garza says, I don't understand how certain fans defend Kyle when he loses to inferior opponents time and time again. How confident is that group plus the vets when he's never beaten KC? I have a theory about people who spend a lot of their energy online defending Kyle Shanahan when they've never met him. I feel like a lot of younger 49er fans, he's been here 8 years, sort of grew up with Kyle. And while they know the history of the team, they really learned football from Kyle. And they see the NFL through his eyes. And so if the 49ers were to move on and bring in another coach, a lot of these young Niner fans, young Niner content creators would have to like start over and learn a new system and learn a new coach. And it would be everyone at square one. I think a lot of people feel like they understand Kyle Shanahan's offense the best and they know what the plays are called and they know the progressions and they're like his official spokesman for fans who just don't understand ball. Like, okay, you're in the Kyle Shanahan fan club because that's the coach that you've been following for your whole life. But there's other coaches out there, I promise. Good ones. Bill Kennedy says, did you sit next to Lombardi in any conversation? No. Thank goodness. They sat me up above. I sat next to Tracy Sandler. Nice Jew. Lombardi? Not a Jew. Bill Kennedy says, Maxime Laflamme says, Grant, will Jed speak after this year? Remember him tweeting about less embarrassing stuff. Yeah, Jed, why don't you do a little press conference and talk about how disappointed you are this team missed the playoffs? Matthew McBride says, where was the defense? Sorensen is a joke of a DC. The Jedi says, don't let Lynch off the hook. I'm just saying. Goldtow says, this team is one draft and free agency away from the Super Bowl win. No. They could knock out the draft next year. They could have really good free agent signings. But as long as Kyle Shanahan is Kyle Shanahan and won't change a lick, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. Darnold and Goff are both having a poop off. Overrated. Showtime 2118 says, does Lombardi get paid by the Niners or does he actually believe Purdy has a great season? He makes it seem like Joe Montana is playing quarterback. He does not get paid by the 49ers. I don't know what his motivation is. Margaret Healy says, Kyle wants to be the coolest, smartest guy in the room, more important than winning. That's why he's never wrong in his eyes. There's a lot of theories as to why Kyle Shanahan is never wrong and can't take criticism or look at himself in the mirror. I don't know. I'm not his therapist, but there are a lot of theories. E. Gonzalez says, if you underplay your contract, you should be considered a movable asset. Bosa, Fred, Kittle. I got a topic. Here's one bonus topic. So we're all focused on Brock Purdy's contract extension this offseason. Will he get $60 million a year? And if the Niners lowball him, will he hold out? Is there going to be drama? Is it going to be like Ayuk? What about Kittle? Did you know that George Kittle is entering the final season of his contract? And he has no guaranteed money left. All the vets on the team who had no guaranteed money left in their contract last year held out and got new deals. What if Kittle holds out? The Niners have to end the holdouts. Their goal for the offseason has to be no holdouts. Because one of the things that messed up the season before it started was no one was at training camp. Training camp kind of matters for team building. So George Kittle just had another all-pro season. He's the best tight end in the league. He's entering the final year of his deal. The Niners have bent over backwards to make every star on their team happy. You really think he's going to say, you know what? Sure, I could ask for a new deal right now, coming off one of my best seasons ever. But, I won't. Why would I do that? I love this team. I love this front office. Why would I ask for more money? It's not about money. I think it's highly likely that he's going to ask for a new deal, an extension that makes him the highest paid tight end in the league. What are the Niners going to do about it? Are they going to give him an extension and Purdy an extension? Are they going to trade George Kittle? Does Kittle want to be here? Sure, he says he does. This team's 6-11. And the coach is lost in his play sheet. Who am I? That's Kyle Shanahan. That's my impression of Kyle Shanahan. Who am I? That's Kyle looking at his play sheet. They're going to have to give him a lot of money or not. This team could look a lot different next year. I know they want to run it back, but do the players? How eager is George to be on this team next year? I don't know if they pay him. And then there's Fred Warner. Fred Warner also has no guaranteed money left on his deal, and his cap number is going to be almost $30 million next season. I'm thinking he wants an extension. Why did he play the whole season on a fractured ankle? Oh, because he wants to go to the negotiating table and say, I'm still great. Which I'm not sure he is. I mean, without Dre Greenlaw, do you really want to pay Fred Warner $20 million a year? What impact does he make without Dre Greenlaw? So you got Kittle needs a new deal, may not be so happy. Warner needs a new deal, may not be so happy. How are the Niners going to handle that? I mean, again, they're saying this was just a one-off, we'll be fine, long off season, we'll figure it out. Yeah, what if Purdy holds out? What if Kittle holds out? What if Warner holds out? Oh, they won't, though. They love being on this team. Do they? Does anyone on this team look like they're having a good time? Does anyone on this team look like they're dying to come back next year? Hold us back. We got this figured out. How many times this year when the Niners lost the game did they walk up to the post-game press conference with that glazed look in their eyes and be like, we're really mad. No more Mr. Nice Guy. You know what? Now that we've lost 7 out of 8, watch out. We're pissed. We got to hear that all year, right? Did it seem hollow? I don't know. I think the Niners got some issues on their hands. Nick Sorensen is one of the Niners' biggest issues because I don't think they have a choice at this point. I think they have to fire him. He was doing okay. 12 points against the Rams. Do or die game. He did a pretty good job against Matthew Stafford until the end of the game when, of course, he couldn't stop him. Sorensen's awful at the end of games. But for a while, it seemed like he was figuring it out, and maybe it was too soon to write him off. But then the Niners get eliminated from the playoffs, and the defense just tanks. 29 points they give up against Miami, 40 against Detroit, and then 47 against Arizona. I mean, I don't see how they don't fire him. And again, I feel for him because, he's what Kyle Shanahan wanted. Shanahan wants to be vanilla and predictable on defense, and I don't know why. And Sorensen does that. I don't think he has a whole lot of autonomy. I think he's essentially coloring between the lines that Kyle Shanahan draws. But if Fred Warner and Nick Bosa are talking about how embarrassed they are, and it's not their fault, then they're probably going to have to fire their second DC in 2 years. And once you start going through coordinators every year, I think it's pretty clear that the head coach is next. You can't fire a defensive coordinator every single year. You can fire 2 in 2 years, but the third guy's got to stick. And if he doesn't stick, then it's you. It's not, Nick Sorensen is a problem, but he is not the root cause of the 49ers problems. Kyle Shanahan. And here's the thing with Sorensen is he applied for the job in 2023. And the Niners thought, no, not good enough. That's why they went outside the facility, outside the organization to hire Steve Wilks. They kept Nick Sorensen, but they did not want Sorensen calling plays, game planning week to week, because he wasn't good enough, didn't have the experience. This guy was a special teams coordinator. Then the Niners lose the Super Bowl, and Kyle Shanahan can't blame himself because he's incapable. So he fires Wilks in a fit of rage or whatever, an emotional decision, and promotes the guy he had decided wasn't good enough for the job just 12 months before. So what did you think was going to happen this year? And I think what's interesting about the Niners too is like, there's something so lifeless about this team, particularly the defense. Nick Bosa said it himself. He said as soon as the season was over and they were out of playoff contention, he went to Miami and played a game like with no pulse. He said, I've never done this before. I've never played in a game that didn't mean anything. And I was kind of dead out there. And I needed to like recalibrate and figure out a way to play with urgency. It's like, well, yeah, but maybe if you had a coach who had some passion, defensive coordinator or head coach, maybe you could feed off of it. Maybe that's what he was longing for when he was looking at the Lions. Like, man, that Dan Campbell is so passionate. Like he cried. He just breaks out into tears. He's so happy sometimes. I could feed off of some of that energy because I don't got it right now, and Kyle doesn't have it. He's over there like this. And Nick Sorensen's over here like this. You got two coaches who have no passion between them. No enthusiasm. One's quieter than the other. And the team plays like it, particularly the defense. If they bring in a new D coordinator, could it be someone who has a pulse? Because again, to me, what's the problem with this team isn't necessarily scheme. Does Nick Sorensen call too much zone? Yeah. Does he not blitz enough? Yeah. But the problem with this team is culture. And Kyle Shanahan sets that tone. So what worked in the past? Saleh and D'Amico. Those guys are culture setters. Those guys are enthusiastic. Those guys are passionate. I think they offset a lot of Kyle Shanahan's, what's the word? What he doesn't have. So Nick, I think you played yourself out of the job. Sorry. Never should have been given this job in the first place. That was, as soon as they made him the defensive coordinator and brought in Brandon Staley to help him just in case, that's when we should have known that something was way off. Who the hell decided that was a good idea? And we had to take it seriously in the offseason. Like, well, it could work. Let's not write off Brandon Staley just yet. Maybe the Brandon Staley, Nick Sorensen combination will be better than Steve Wilks. No. It was way worse. And what's funny is Brandon Staley, it's unclear what exactly he does here. They say he runs the weekly meeting on Thursdays that's called the ball meeting. If you don't know what this is, it's about the importance of not turning the ball over on offense and forcing takeaways on defense. Yes, this is the real thing. Now, in the past couple of years, Nick Sorensen ran this meeting, and the Niners did force a lot of takeaways. Maybe it's because he had the magic words. I don't know. Maybe it's a complete coincidence, but now it's Staley running that defense, and the Niners haven't forced a takeaway in like 2 months. The one thing they ask him to do, he can't even do it. And I'm sure there's one Chargers fan watching this being like, boom, I could have told you that. So I don't know. But I mean, it all comes back to Kyle Shanahan's overwhelming arrogance. Oh, Brandon Staley was a freaking washout, abysmal failure with the Chargers. He'll work with me. He'll work with me. Oh, the Packers just ran Devondre Campbell out of town. He'll work with me. No problem. No one wants Jake Moody. I'll take him. Everyone else is wrong about Jake Moody. I'm right. Doesn't matter how many kicks he misses. I don't even know what I'm talking about. Let's talk about Jawan Jennings. We're talking about Has Kyle Shanahan lost the locker room? I don't know. But when one of your best players gets thrown out of a game in the first half, 25 yards before he gets to 1,000 for the season, you got to wonder, like, what is going on here? You don't do that in football. You don't go out and commit 15-yard penalties because you got into a, like, little one-on-one battle with some DB. So Juwan Jennings and this other DB get, like, offsetting 15-yard penalties. Then he does it on the next play. Back-to-back plays. Then after the game in the locker room, he's smiling and talking about he didn't do anything wrong and it wasn't his fault and the referees are out to get him. He's got a reputation. It's not fair. And they got to look at the film and see that it was a mistake. You know, a strong head coach, a passionate head coach goes up to Juwan Jennings during the game and says, we don't do that here. I love your passion. I love that you block hard, but you cost yourself and you cost us. You have to be more, you have to care more about the team than yourself, than your ego. Your own little battle with some freaking DB. But did Kyle go up to Juwan Jennings and say something and say, that's not how we play football here and we have a standard, or did he just do this? I don't know. You tell me. Like, what Juwan Jennings did wasn't a good look, but I feel like, again, it's indicative of the problem with the culture of this team. Juwan Jennings gets ejected after back-to-back personal fouls and feels like he can stand in the locker room afterward with a smile on his face and say he didn't do anything wrong. He should have already been talked to for the head coach and be like, hey, you did something wrong. Don't ever do that again. Did it 2 games in a row. Don't do that again. Deebo Samuel puts his hands on the long snapper's throat and the head coach defends Deebo and said the long snapper was out of line. Brandon Ayuk, blatant disrespect, comes out to practice in the wrong shorts. Kyle Shanahan has to get him to put the right shorts on. Like, player after player kind of thumbing their nose to Kyle Shanahan's authority. I'll do what I want to do. I mean, kudos to Juwan Jennings for playing hard, but, like, respect the game. Respect your coach. Kyle, demand respect. Don't let that happen. How many times do the Niners lose a game and one of their players says, yeah, well, at least I did well, or they got lucky? Over and over and over again this year. And why would you expect the players to have any other attitude, any other message when that's the coach's message? If the coach doesn't come out and respect losing, if the coach comes out after losses and shrugs it off and says he did the best he could, it wasn't his fault, then other players are going to do that too. And they'll just pass it down and pass it down. I can't think of a more fitting thing to happen than Juwan Jennings getting ejected in the final game of the season when he's 25 yards away from having a life-changing milestone. One day, his grandkid will be like, hey, Juwan, do you ever have 1,000 yards in the NFL? And he'll say, almost. It's 25 yards away, but I blocked this DB. His DB was pissing me off. It was annoying. Kept talking to me. So I blocked him twice, really hard. They kicked me out of the game. It wasn't my fault, though. It wasn't my fault. I shouldn't have got kicked out. But, oh, so you didn't have 1,000 yards, the 8-year-old grandson will say. And Juwan will be like, no, but I should have. And the 8-year-old will go back to eating Cheerios and watching cartoons, if those exist, when we're 70. Cool, Grandpa, you didn't do it because you did something dumb. Anyway, good player, hell of a season. Fitting way for it to end. And then Brock Purdy didn't play in this game, but somehow he lost a lot of money. I think he lost a lot of money in this game because the offense wasn't worse with Josh Dobbs on the field than it was with him. Remember, Purdy played against the Cardinals this year, week 5 at home. Ayuk played in that game. Jordan Mason played in that game. George Kittle played in that game. Purdy threw 2 picks in the second half, 1 touchdown pass, quarterback rating of 61, offense scored 23 points. Not great. Dobbs plays in this game. He's also not great. We've seen Josh Dobbs for years. He's He's a second string quarterback at best, probably more of a third string quarterback. 3 turnovers in this game, 2 picks, 1 fumble. And yet he still put up a better passer rating against the Cardinals this year than Brock Purdy did. He still put up more points against the Cardinals this year than Brock Purdy did. And I'm not saying that Josh Dobbs is better than Brock Purdy, because he's not. But what I am saying is if the offense isn't clearly better with Brock Purdy and starters on the field against the Cardinals than they are with Josh Dobbs and backups on the field against the Cardinals, and what is Brock Purdy's value really? I mean, does he move the needle in one way or another? On a good team, he produces. But Jimmy Garoppolo produced with Christian McCaffrey on this team. On a weaker team, he doesn't necessarily elevate it any more than freaking Josh Dobbs. So I don't know. It seems like the Niners have a lot of leverage in this negotiation if they want to use it. Purdy's coming off an abysmal year. Like, if you want to ask for an extension, you want to do what Kittle just did. Have one of the best seasons of your career and say, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I'm the best player in the league in my position. What are you going to do about it? Purdy's over here being like, hey, let's just pretend like that season didn't happen. What do you say? I mean, he played poorly. And then his third string backup comes in and plays better than he did against a common opponent. Yikes. So the Niners could say, look, man, I mean, we liked you. You were really good in 2022, 2023, but so was the whole team. We were in blowout after blowout. You contributed, but we think we could have won a lot. I mean, we could have won those games with Jimmy Garoppolo. So now this year we come back and Christian's not here and you have every opportunity to show that you're the man. And what do? 10 picks in the second half of games this year. You're definitely better than Brandon Allen. But then in the final game of the season, we played Josh Dobbs with a bunch of backups, some starting offensive linemen. Kittle doesn't make it through the whole game. Debo doesn't play. Not that he's good. Garendo goes down. The running back is Patrick Taylor freaking Jr. And they still score 24? Kind of seems like this offense can do that no matter who the quarterback is, unless he's Brandon Allen. I'm not saying the offense is great, that the scheme is great. It just seems like it produces what it produces, and the quarterback, at least Brock, is along for the ride until the second half when he messes up the ride and throws the picks. Like Dobbs did today. What Dobbs did today was an impression of Brock Purdy. You were watching a quarterback who'd been studying Brock all year and then did a pretty good impression of him. Played really well in the first half, scrambled around, made some gutsy throws, and then completely melted down the second half and lost. And what's funny is when Dobbs does it, everyone's like, oh yeah, he's trash. Oh, right. But when Brock does it, people are like, well, the offensive line isn't good enough. Well, I mean, he was you can't just judge him off of one bad game or one bad season. I mean, he's still seventh best in QBR. No. It's fair to have the same reaction to Brock Purdy's season that you had to Josh Dobbs today. Ooh, that's the reaction. Ew, that's not good enough. It's not worth any money. And yet, the 49ers somehow, they have a great ability to block all that out and see the world the way they want to see it. Kyle's great. Brock's great. Evidence be damned. Bring him back. Just fire Nick Sorensen, Jake Moody, and tell everyone that everything's going to be okay. That's what I think is going to happen this year. They're going to pay Brock Purdy so freaking fast, a lot of money, and they'll throw themselves a freaking parade. We have a franchise quarterback. How do you know? Because we paid him. That's the evidence. I mean, they're going to extend Purdy right away. Whatever the hell George Kittle wants, they'll give him. Whatever the hell Fred Warner wants, they'll give him. They won't make any meaningful signings in free agency because, like, once again, second offseason in a row, they're going to be spending all of their money on their own players, keeping them happy or something, because that's worked out so well for the Niners. Then they'll draft. Kyle trade up for a running back in round 3. You already know that's going to happen. But everything's going to be better next year because they won't have injuries. Like, injuries don't happen. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe this is the offseason where Kyle Shanahan finally matures and puts it all together. Could happen. Brother Bob says, shall we debate Rob Fields, Guerrero, and Vish re Kyle Levy? Brother Bob, I don't think they want to. Matthew McBride says, Kyle is our best option. Who would you get to replace him? Sorensen needs to go. Lombardi as well. Is Kyle the best option? Is he? If he's not good enough to win a Super Bowl, then what do you want? He used to be good enough to finish second, but now it looks like he's really declining. So I don't know. I don't have the answers here. I would rather have Ben Johnson than him. I would rather have Brian Flores than him. Brian Flores doesn't hide behind his play sheet all game. Brian Flores would demand respect. Those are two coaches that I would be interested in. CM Top Flight says Singletary finished 5-10 and got fired. Kyle finishes 6-11 and might keep his job is wicked. Major changes need to happen, not minor changes. Agree. Showtime 2118 says, do you think if Krug or Matt M asked Kyle the same questions as you, they would get the same snarky response? It seems personal to me. I don't think they would get the same snarky response. It does feel personal. That being said, if Matt Mayoko or Larry Krueger asked Kyle Shanahan to assess himself, I do think Kyle would say, I don't understand that question, because I honestly think he doesn't understand how to answer that. I think he's incapable. So I think that part was just him being honest. Matt Flores, realtor, says Kyle treats running backs like Kendall treats waiters. NRPI. I don't know what that means. Kendall? What is that? Is that from that movie, from that TV show? Succession? Michael says, what was your takeaway from Kittle's answer to your question earlier? My takeaway is that he's going to have some maybe possibly harsh things to say to Kyle Shanahan. He's going to keep it real and give him some criticism, and that it's private. That's my takeaway. If he had nice things to say about him, he could have said some of it publicly, but sounds like there's going to be, okay, Kyle, what do you want to say? I was really good this year. I missed a couple assignments, a couple blocks, okay, now your turn. Colin Anthony says, I think SF is starting to really feel the loss of Saleh and D'Amico as personalities. Their passion and warmth counterbalanced Kyle. Smart but cold and mechanical, not inspiring as a leader of men. Colin, I agree with you. Maybe some people would disagree. Maybe they had success with Steve Wilkes last year, who's not particularly enthusiastic, although he's not exactly as mechanical as Kyle. So I'll read what you wrote again. I think SF is starting to really feel the loss of Saleh and D'Amico as personalities. Their passion and warmth counterbalanced Kyle. Smart but cold and mechanical, not inspiring as a leader of men. I agree. And for a while, I felt like Kyle, while he lacked those human elements to be a leader, was smart enough to understood that he lacked those human elements and hired defensive coordinators with that in mind to fill in that gap. Hence Saleh, hence D'Amico. But the last two hires make me feel like Kyle doesn't even have that amount of self-awareness. So we'll see if he fixes that this offseason. David Camacho says JJ missed out on his first 1K yard season. He did. Anoop says for years the Niners were in denial of losing Super Bowls and NFC Championship games. Now they're in denial of a full rebuild. Jed is clueless. Kyle is lost. And Lynch is acting. 2025 season feels ruined already. I can't wait for it. I really hope the Niners change nothing and really tell themselves that they'll be fine. It was just injuries. Please test that theory. I want you to test that theory for science. David Camacho says Burrow, Allen, Lamar could have taken us to the playoffs. We are a 5-time Super Bowl champion franchise. We should not only strive for that, but demand it. We can't think is right to throw $50 million to a mid quarterback. Yeah, Brock Purdy was very, very responsible for this bad season, but so is Kyle. And if you put Joe Burrow is he making the playoffs? I don't even know. He just struggled to get in the playoffs because his team isn't that good and his coach isn't that good. Like, same thing could have happened there this year with him. David Camacho, got you. Baby Radiant says, is Nick Sorensen still learning, quote unquote? He talks about learning. Brock Purdy talks about learning. He'll come out after losses and talk about how it was a learning experience. Like, nah, dude, you're entering your 4th year next year and you want $60 million a year. The learning period's over. You either got it or you don't. And it looks like you don't. So, I don't know. Those are my takeaways. The game was like a glorified preseason game, but somehow the 49ers humiliated themselves once again. And finally, the players came out and said, this is freaking embarrassing. Yeah, it's been like this all year. And every time they lost a game, the players would come out and be like, this just isn't us, man. This isn't us. We are going to lock in. We are pissed. Finally, they were like, this is us, and it's embarrassing. And I don't want to be associated with it. So, Kyle, you got the stench. Your team has the stench of death. The whole team. What are you going to do about it? Because the stench is coming from you. You know the phrase, fish rots from the head? You're the head. Culture's rotten. Players are embarrassed. George Kittle's going to sit you down and give you a talking to. What are you going to do to change yourself? Can't wait to see what the next act of Kyle Shanahan's career holds. MD 2020 says, bring Richard Sherman in as a coach. You want accountability. He just might be someone who can light that fire again. It's a pretty good idea. I don't know if he wants to work that hard and live in Santa Clara. And, coaches like get to the facility at 6 a.m. and leave at like 9 p.m. For 6 months of the year, they don't see sunlight during the week. They're inside. So, and I mean, except for when they're at practice. So I don't know if Richard Sherman wants to do that. It seems like he's making some good money as a podcaster, which is easier than coaching. Let me just tell you. But hey, Kyle, you want a fresh addition to your quality control team? Right here, buddy. I've been auditioning for years and you keep overlooking me. And what happens? You don't win a Super Bowl. What about if me and you joined forces, Kyle? I know you don't like me and you think I don't like you, but really, I just want to be on your team. I'm trying to help you. And clearly, if you've been watching throughout the years, you understand that my insights into football and my suggestions are the best. And I'm always right. So why don't we make it official? I'm thinking for $5 million a year to be quality control. I know that's probably a $60,000 a year job, but I'm really experienced. I've been doing it for years. So I'm thinking $5 million a year. And what's cool is like, I've been pontificating about the Niners for years, hours a day, but I know how to fix the organization and I've never said it publicly. I'm saving it. It's a secret. And if you want to know the secret to how to save the organization and win a Super Bowl, just hire me for $5 million a year and I will deliver the 6th Lombardi trophy. But I can't give you my secrets right now, unfortunately. You'll have to pay me $5 million a year. And if you think I'm not worth it, you're about to give Brock Purdy $60 million a year to do what Josh Dobbs could do for $1.50. So think about it. Think about it, guys. The Niners didn't have a good season, but you did. Everyone watching, 3,300 people watching, you guys had a great season. You hung in there. You had a lot more passion and enthusiasm than the Niners did. And now you get to go celebrate. I want you to go have a nice, if you got a steak, make it. If you got a Beaujolais, drink it. Toast to yourself because you're the big winner tonight. You're not the one that has to look in the mirror. That's Kyle. Kyle, no Beaujolais for you tonight, all right? Coors Light, a slice of pizza, and just a long session of looking at yourself in the mirror. Actually looking. I'm not talking about like metaphorically looking in the mirror. No. Physically look at yourself for 12 hours straight. I dare you. I think you'll have some insights. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'll be back tomorrow, flying home. Draft season, baby. Can't wait.